Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar. My name is Christy. I'm the marketing manager here at Kids & Company, and we are so excited to be able to provide tips and tricks for yourself and your children to get the sleep you need and deserve throughout this turbulent time. We are very fortunate today to have Laura Wilson, certified infant and toddler sleep consultant from WeeSleep, as our facilitator today. Laura is a mom of 3 little ones. She's gaga over babies and loves kids of all ages. She's passionate about being of service to others, and there's no doubt she appreciates a good night's sleep. If you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen anytime. We're going to do our best to get all of these questions addressed, or as many as we can. We got a lot in advance as well that we're going to try to touch on. So if you have any questions, try to use the Q&A function if you can, as opposed to the chat, just so that we can keep track of everything. But if you do have any questions that are more appropriate for the chat, feel free to reach out to us there too, as we'll be monitoring both. Over to you, Laura.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm so excited to help you guys out with some sleep. As Kirsty was saying, I'm WeeSleep, Laura W. And today I'm just going to be offering you guys some really high level tips. When I say high level tips, this is meaning it's just kind of like general average tips. And that is because typically when I'm working with a client, I am working with them for 2 weeks. So I typically can, really dive into their schedule, and we have like email support with each other and phone calls. So I really get to know their little one. So for today, it's not as easy to get into, your daily schedule and your little one's personality and all that. So it's just going to be really high level, average, general tips. But hopefully you can apply some of them and get some sleep. If I don't get to your questions today, because there's a lot of you on this webinar, which is awesome, then I offer free 15-minute sleep calls. So feel free to book a call with me, and then we can chat some more and get into a little bit more detail about what's going on after the webinar. Kirsty's going to be sending you all the information about me and my email, and the link to book the free 15-minute call, and also the link to all my programs if you want to know more about working with me and what that's all about. So yeah, high level tips. I'm going to get into 6 high level tips, and then we're going to be opening up the Q&A. Again, remember, these are just general tips. This is a non-judgment webinar. So my whole philosophy is rest is best. Whatever you guys are doing at home, if everyone's getting sleep, then that's totally fine. Then that's awesome. But most of the time people are joining this webinar because they want to make some changes, and they maybe have some issues going on that they need help with. So take the tips and hopefully they can help. So tip number 1, we're going to talk about bedtime. So choose an early bedtime. So typically an early bedtime looks like between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. And the reason for this is that we want to give your little one the opportunity to sleep 10 to 12 hours at night. And this goes for almost all ages. Newborns might be the only exception where we do see a later bedtime in terms of like a 9, 10, or 11 o'clock. But once they hit that 3-month mark and older, and this is all the way until they're like preteens, a bedtime between 6 and 8 p.m. gives them the opportunity to sleep 10 to 12 hours at night. Most of the time we have to be up in the morning for school, for preschool, for daycare, for caregivers, for work, whatever the reason is, we generally have to be up between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. So we want to make sure we're giving an opportunity for our little ones to get that sleep. And then also after 8 p.m., a lot of babies, toddlers, preschools, children, they become overtired. And with overtired, they get like really hyper, and it's harder for them to fall asleep, and then they don't sleep as well. So if we stay kind of in between the 6 and the 8 p.m., sorry, my phone's making noises, then that will give them the opportunity to get a more restorative sleep. So that is tip number 1, choose an early bedtime. Tip number 2 is to try to put your child to sleep in the same place every night. And again, this tip can be applied to all ages. we really want to create consistency when it comes to our sleep. So if we're sending mixed messages in terms of, one time they're sleeping in the bed with us, and then another time they're sleeping in their own bed, and then another time they're, sleeping maybe downstairs on the couch or in the swing or in the bassinet or in our arms or wherever, it sends mixed messages and mixed signals to our little one. So we really want them to understand and expect where they need to sleep, and also where their safe place is. So in order to be consistent, if we put them to sleep in the same place every single night, and then even for naps, then this really sets a clear expectation in terms of where to sleep, and it might help them settle a little bit more when it is time to sleep. That was tip number 2, put your child to sleep in the same place every night. Tip number 3, and this one is really, really hard. This is like the goal at the end of the day of all sleep. And it pertains a little bit more to babies and toddlers, but it can still be an issue with, preschoolers and older children. And that is to put your child to sleep awake every single time they go to sleep. Often when they're, newborns, we're, nursing them to sleep, rocking them to sleep. And then that can continue for a really long time. I deal with a lot of babies and toddlers that still need assistance to go to sleep. So we really want to try to give them the opportunity to go to sleep all on their own. Typically what happens is there's things called sleep props. So that can be anything from a soother, a pacifier, rocking, bouncing, nursing, bottle feeding, co-sleeping, really anything that helps them go to sleep when they wake up from a nap, middle of the night, bedtime, whenever. They're looking for that thing to help them go back to sleep. So if we put them to sleep awake, they then learn independent skills of how to self-soothe and fall asleep on their own. So this is a very, very challenging one. Again, it's like a really, really high level tip. And that's kind of the goal of when clients are working with me in terms of how do I achieve this goal. But you can start by at least trying it out to see what happens. And you never know, they might fall asleep on their own. But yeah, that's tip number 3. That's the kind of the ultimate goal. And tip number 4 is back to the bedtime. And this is about, again, consistency and creating those routines. So tip number 4 is creating a predictable bedtime routine. So typically a bedtime routine should consist of 30 to 40 minutes in length. We don't really want a super, super quick rushed bedtime, because that's going to be really hard for our little ones to calm down and get ready to sleep. And then the opposite, we don't really want a long, drawn out bedtime, because again, they could be reaching that overtired state. And then it's just a really long, drawn out process for everyone. And it turns into power struggles between the little one and trying to go to sleep in yourself. So 30, 40 minutes in length. I like to start with a bath every night, but if you don't have the time, if everyone's too busy, if your child has sensitive skin, whatever the case may be, you can do a wash down, maybe with some massage or some lotion or coconut oil or whatever afterwards, if you can't do the bath. But I do love the bath if possible, because it really is something different that you don't typically do during the day. So it's a great sleepy cue for your little one in terms of getting them to understand that, okay, sleep is coming. I'm in the bath. Sleep is coming. It's going to be time for me to go to sleep soon. And then it can be followed up with whatever you want to choose after that. PJs, short story, brushing teeth, a little song, little lullaby, whatever that may be. Usually there's a feed involved in there, or maybe like a snack or a bottle or whatever it is. And again, all within 30 to 40 minutes of length. And another thing about the bedtime is, even before you start that bedtime routine, really start setting the tone and the mood in your house. don't go from watching TV, playing loud music, all these bright lights on, to all of a sudden like, okay, let's go, time for bed, upstairs. Toddlers, babies, children, they have a tough time with transitions. So if we help them with that transition in terms of like setting the tone and the mood in the house, of turning down the lights, maybe turning off the music, turning off the TV, and just maybe doing like a cleanup together, or just some like quiet time of playing with some quiet toys about 10 or 15 minutes before that routine even starts, it will help them transition into the bedtime routine, and hopefully you'll get a little bit less resistance at bedtime. So that was tip number 4, create a predictable bedtime routine. All right, the tip number 5 pertains more to babies and toddlers, but it can pertain to older children if we have anyone with older children on the call. And that is that if your baby wakes, or your toddler or your children wake in the middle of the night, wait a few minutes before intervening. When they're newborns, it's kind of like, in us, innate to, as soon as we hear them cry, to just go to them right away and feed them or comfort them or do whatever we need to do. But as they get older, if we're constantly doing that every single time that they wake, we're really not giving them the opportunity to again learn how to kind of self-soothe or fall back asleep on their own or be independent. So I usually suggest, if you can give like 10 minutes, just 10 minutes of waiting it out just to see what will happen. Maybe they'll just roll over and go back to sleep. Maybe they'll grab that little Levy. Maybe they won't, but it still is kind of setting the expectation of them understanding that as soon as I cry, mom or dad may not come. So give them that 10 minutes if possible, no matter what age, just to see what will happen. And let them kind of figure it out a little bit. Depending on the age, you can plus or minus. If they're really, really little, like newborns, that maybe, and it's time to feed, maybe you don't wait, or maybe you just do 5 minutes. If they're older, I would say definitely try for the 10. If they're even older than that, maybe you wait a little bit longer. But yeah, so tip number 5, if your baby wakes during the night, wait a few minutes to intervene. And the last high-level tips are naps. So naps can be very challenging for all ages. There is less sleep pressure, it's called, less of that need or desire or drive to go to sleep than nighttime sleep. So naps can be very challenging. But if we understand how many naps our baby or toddler should be having and how long they should be awake before they're supposed to nap, then it can be helpful. So know how many naps your little one should be having. Know how long your little one should be awake for. So as an example, between 6 and 8 weeks when they're newborns, they kind of just wake, eat, then go back to sleep. There's no real schedule. You just kind of go with the flow and make sure that you're feeding them every 2 to 3 hours. After 8 weeks, when they get to become, a baby, usually 3 months and older, naps change. And typically they're having 4 to 5 naps. And then when they get older, around 4 or 5 months, that can drop to 3 to 4 naps. And then 6 months to over a year, it's usually 2 naps. And then anywhere from 13 to 18 months is when they usually drop down to 1 nap. And they can hold that 1 nap usually all the way till at least kindergarten. Some kids around 2, 2.5, 3 years old will drop the nap. But some will continue it all the way till they're 4 years old. So know how many naps your little one should be having, know the wake times, and look for those sleepy cues. So when your newborns, when they're little, their sleepy cues is yawning. Typically yawn 1, okay, let's start the nap time routine. Let's start to get them ready for sleep. Yawn 2, they should almost be asleep. Yawn 3, they're falling asleep, they're asleep. And then after that, 3 months and older, they start to develop more gross motor skills and fine motor skills. So they're able to rub their eyes, they're able to pull on their ears, they're able to pull on their hair. Sometimes even their eyebrows or around their eyes get really red, their cheeks can get red, they stare off into space, they get quiet. And then the obvious signs of, they're starting to get really cranky, nothing's interesting them anymore. And crying. And when you get to that state, get them to bed as soon as possible. When they're getting to the state of like being crying and cranky and miserable, then they're getting to that overtired state, and it's going to be really hard to put them down. So know your wake windows, know how many naps your little one should be having, and look for those sleepy cues in terms of when you're putting them down for naps as well. So yeah, those are my very, very high level, quick tips. Again, general tips. But now we can kind of dive into our Q&A and get a little bit more detailed. Again, my responses to you guys are going to be high level because it really depends on the situation. And I usually work with clients for like 2 weeks and diving into these details a little bit more. But again, book a call with me if your question's not answered or you want to dive into more detail. So yeah. All right.
Thanks, Laura. This is great. So we'll start with a few of the questions that we got emailed in to us in advance, and we'll jump to the Q&A from there. So the first question that we have is, we sleep trained my 4-year-old when he was 2, and we had 1 full year of incredible sleep routines. He would put himself to bed at 7:30 p.m. Now it's a struggle to get him in bed by 10 p.m. and he will often wake up in the middle of the night and climb into bed with us. Right now I have a newborn, so this does not work. How do you suggest we reestablish routines?
Right. So 4 years old, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So your little one could be regressing a little bit. I often see that happen a lot when baby comes into the picture. They want to kind of act like a baby. They want to be center of attention. But it also comes down to those sleep props that I was talking about. So when they're really little, like I said, it can be like soothers, rocking, bouncing, nursing, etc. But as they get older, these sleep props or sleep crutches or sleep associations, whatever you want to call it, start to form into new ones. So for him, it sounds like his sleep prop is sleeping in bed with you. He wakes up in the middle of the night, and the expectation is when I wake up in the middle of the night, I just get out of bed and climb into mama and dada's bed, and then I get to fall asleep. So we need to set more clear kind of rules and expectations around sleep. And in order to do that, you have to come up with a plan. You have to figure out what you're going to do when your little one comes into your room in the middle of the night and wants to sleep in the bed with you. Are you going to walk your little one back into the bed and tuck him in and say goodnight, and that's the end of it? That's probably not going to happen. He's probably going to get very, very upset and freak out and want to climb back in the bed with you. So you need to come up with a plan. And that's where either your partner and yourself come up with a plan and set very clear expectations, and then you'll see results within 2 to 4 nights. Or you turn to an expert like myself, and that's where I would work with you and I would teach you exactly, let's set up his room properly. Let's set up some reward system for him. Let's set up a plan in place in terms of what you're going to do about bedtime, what you're going to do about those middle of the night wakings. But again, you have to be consistent and set those clear expectations. And that involves some sort of plan that you have to implement. So again, high level, hope that helps.
Perfect. Thank you. Our next question is, I was wondering how to get my toddler coming from into my bed. Oh, you know what? This sounds very similar. Daily. It's always around 2 to 3 a.m. that she wakes up and needs to come into my bed. She refuses to go back to sleep in her crib no matter how hard I try. So you kind of just touched on this.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing. And often you find them coming in earlier in the morning because they get into lighter stages of sleep, or maybe there's a temperature change. But again, it comes down to clear expectations. You have to set those boundaries with the little ones, especially toddlers, or they will just push. They know that, if I do this, I'm going to get this. So you need to flip it and set the clear expectations that even though you wake at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the middle of the night, I'm sorry, you still need to sleep in your own bed. That's the expectation. And again, how you do that is exactly what I said before in terms of setting up a plan and putting a plan in place into what you're going to do and how you're going to get your little one to sleep in that bed all night.
Perfect. Next question is, how can I get my 2-month-old baby to sleep without the pacifier? Sometimes she'll sleep without it, but I don't want it to be a crutch for sleep time. Should I just cut it out cold turkey?
Yeah, so I mean, 2-month-old, you're still kind of in survival, and they're all just habits, and habits can be formed and changed at any time. So if it's working for you and everyone's getting sleep and the pacifier is working, then roll with it. But if it's not working and you want to make some changes, or like you said, you're just kind of a little bit worried about what's to come down the road, you can start making some small changes here and there. So back to the 10 minutes that I was talking about when they wake in the night, you can do the flip side of that and give them 10 minutes at the beginning when they're trying to fall asleep independently. So if you're going to do it at bedtime, go through your bedtime routine, put them down in their crib or their bassinet and give them 10 minutes. If you can't do 10, maybe 5 because they're little, and just let them try to figure it out for themselves. And this is without the pacifier. This is completely independent sleep. So just let them kind of have that time to, gain that independence, to learn how to self-soothe. Maybe she'll suck her thumb. Maybe they'll suck their fingers or their hands, or maybe usually they turn their head side to side. But if we don't give them that opportunity, they're never going to learn those self-soothing skills, and they're always going to rely on that soother or that pacifier. In terms of naps, usually I say try with the first nap. The first nap is there's more of that sleep pressure that I was talking about, that need and that desire to go to sleep. So if you are going to do any sort of like nap training or just getting them used to the bassinet or the crib, try for that first nap. And again, put them down to sleep awake, remove any of the sleep props, and give them that 10 minutes to just figure it out. And if they don't go to sleep, then go in there and intervene and get them to sleep, and just keep kind of doing that all the time. And you can do that with your 2-month-old. Just giving her the time to, or him, sorry, I can't remember, giving them the time to just kind of figure it out for themselves. So try with the morning nap, try for bedtime, even wait the 10 minutes in the middle of the night when they wake up. And then still, if you're not having success, then at 3 months, so 12 weeks, 12 pounds is when we usually say you can do formal sleep coaching and training, but really you can do any sort of sleep coaching or training at any age, because again, they're just habits, and habits can be formed and changed at any time. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
Perfect. Thank you. Our next question is, our 22-month-old still cries in the middle of the night. I have told my husband we should not be going in, but he still does and often gives her a bottle. How should we handle the night cries? She often has a very full diaper, so is it okay to change her?
So 22 months old, I think 21 months old,
Yep.
22. So typically, they don't really need any feedings anymore. I mean, it's completely personal choice about the night feeds, but I do find at that age and weight that it's more of a sleep prop than anything, and they don't need that bottle anymore. So you have 2 options. You can do it cold turkey, and again, come up with that plan, or hire someone like myself to come up with a plan for you, exactly what you're going to do instead of feeding them. Are you just going to go in there and, say kind of some key phrases in terms of no bottle tonight, back to sleep, mommy, daddy loves you, and see what happens? Or you can do it slowly in terms of weaning them off of that bottle. So if they maybe get 4 ounces, maybe over the course of a week, you slowly cut it down to 0 ounces. So then 3 ounces, then 2 ounces, then 1 ounce. And hopefully then at that point, they will, just gradually don't need it anymore and sleep through that. I would not suggest changing them unless you absolutely have to. And this goes, that tip for changing them in the night kind of goes for all ages. I wouldn't suggest changing a little one because it really wakes them up. You want to kind of keep them in like a sleepy state at night. You want to not turn on any bright lights. You want to not engage in any conversation with them. So when you're changing them, you often have to turn on some sort of night light. You often have to talk to them in some way. You often have to, wake them up a little bit. So try to keep them in that state of of sleep, of kind of quiet, and it's sleep and it's not playtime. If you absolutely have to change them though, go in there and be like kind of like robot zombie mode, business like, where you're literally going in there, not making any eye contact, not really involving in a conversation with them in any way, keeping the lights as dim as possible, and kind of get in and get out. I used to just not even look at my kids in the middle of the night when I had to change them because, maybe they leaked through or had a poo or had like diaper rash or whatever, and just not even make eye contact with them because I knew that if I was going to look at them, they would smile at me and they'd be so cute. And then I'd laugh and want to smile back. So I used to just kind of get my business mode on, go in there like a robot, zombie, and just in there and get out kind of thing. So so cold turkey, come up with a plan, wean them slowly, and only change them if you absolutely have to.
Perfect. Thank you. Next question is it possible to sleep train a 15-month-old baby that sleeps in the same room as its parents? The baby sleeps in his own bed that is beside mom and dad's bed in the one-bedroom apartment.
Absolutely. Your little one can be trained at any age. Like I said, I've worked with 1-month-olds to 3-month-olds to 3, 4, 5-year-olds. So they can be trained at any time. And I've also worked with many families that are room sharing. So yes.
Perfect. Fantastic. Thank you. Next question is if the baby's daily routine is all over the place, will it impact their ability to sleep a full night?
Yes. So whatever happens during the day affects whatever happens at night. Same thing. Whatever happens at night affects what happens during the day. So it's definitely okay to be flexible. Mental health is very important. So getting out and, going for walks, seeing if you can join any sort of classes, that's 100% okay. It's okay to be flexible in terms of having them sleep on the go. But if they're all over the place in terms of not napping, staying awake too long, staying awake too little, etc., then not getting enough wakeful periods during the day, then it's going to 100% affect what happens at nighttime.
Perfect. Makes sense. Next question is, how do we get our 22-month-old to sleep later in the morning? He used to sleep until 7 and now he's gradually regressed to waking up at 5:30. His naps are also relatively short compared to his friends.
So every baby's different in terms of their sleep needs and how much sleep that they need. So, try not to compare to what others are doing because maybe he's just requiring less sleep. It's a hard question for me to answer because I'd really have to dive deeper into your schedule in terms of like what's going on. What time are they going to bedtime at? What's the solid and food intake like during the day? Are they going to sleep independently? What's their room environment like? Is it a dark room? Are you using a sleep sack? Are they in a crib? Are they in a bed? Are they having enough wakeful periods during the day? What's the room like in the morning? Is it cold for them? Is there any environmental or external noises that are waking them up? So there's a lot that I would really have to look into that, but I can say that set your minimum time for when you want to start your day. With WeeSleep, when we're working with our clients, we say 6 a.m. is the earliest, just like bedtime. 6 p.m. is the earliest for bedtime. 6 a.m. is the earliest that you can start your day. So we have clients that come to us and my child is waking up at 5 a.m. and we get up and we start our day and I give them a bottle or their breakfast and that kind of thing. And my advice to them is nope. They stay in that crib, they stay in that room until 6 a.m. That's the earliest you can start your day. So set the expectation with your little one that you do not start your day until whatever your minimum is. For my household, it's 7 a.m. And I've trained that ever since my kids have been little. They do not enter a room, they do not come out of their rooms until 7 a.m. It didn't happen like this, but with a lot of consistency and clear expectations, we do not start our day until 7 a.m. Again, that's just my family, but every family is different. So you're going to have to set some clear expectations in terms of what time your little one is allowed to come out of their room at or start their day. And then I'd really have to dive into your whole schedule in terms of what's going on and why they're waking up at that time.
Perfect. Thanks. We have a bunch of questions that are similar surrounding any tips that you might have for daylight savings time coming up this weekend.
Yeah. The wonderful daylight savings time. Oh my gosh. I was really hoping that they were going to vote to abolish it, but unfortunately they are not. So you basically have two approaches. You can I would start today even by pushing your little one's schedule by 15 minutes. So you basically want to get to that new time. You want to get an hour ahead. You want to push their schedule an hour ahead by Saturday night. So if your little one goes to bed at 7, by Saturday night, you want your little one's schedule to be pushed an hour ahead. So they'll be going to bed at 8 o'clock on that Saturday night. Hopefully that would mean that they're also starting to slowly wake up later because you're pushing their schedule to have them go to bed. If you can't make that adjustment or you just can't push your little one, then on the day of, you split the difference. So on the day of daylight saving time, you split it by 30 minutes. So if your little one typically goes to sleep at, let's say 1 p.m. for a nap, on that day, then you get to like 12:30 because it's kind of halfway, and you do that for 3 days. Then after 3 days, you go to 1 o'clock time. So you adjust by half an hour for 3 days, splitting the difference. And then after 3 days, you just go to the new time. But yeah, I also just sent out a newsletter and about this, like right before this webinar as well. So you can subscribe to my newsletter. I'll put that information in the email for Christy to send out. And then I've also been posting on all my social media about it as well. So you can follow me on Instagram or Facebook as well.
Perfect. Next question is, my 15-month-old daughter takes 2-hour naps at daycare, but at home over the weekend, she won't nap for longer than 45 minutes. Why is this happening? She sleeps from 7 to 7 at night with no interruptions.
Right. So often I hear this a lot, and it's just a little bit of like a power struggle / mom and dad are just so fun and they have a bit of like FOMO in terms of not wanting to sleep as much when they come home. So at daycare, they just kind of follow the rules and follow what they're supposed to do. And she also might be a little bit more tired. I'm not too sure about the activity level that your little one's having on the weekend, but daycare can be very stimulating with lots of things going on. So she could be a little bit more tired. But I would look into their room environment in terms of how the room is set up. Maybe it's not dark enough. Maybe maybe you don't have white noise playing. So there's, loud external noises that could waking her up. How is she going to sleep? Are they going to sleep independently? Are you assisting her in any way to go to sleep? 40 minutes sounds like a sleep cycle to me. So sleep cycles during the day are anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. And then your little one wakes up. And if they don't know how to go back to sleep on their own, then they're up and you call that a nap. So yeah, I'd have to look at a little bit more about what's going on, but set the clear expectations. You could set also the expectations of no matter what time you wake up, you're in that crib for a minimum of an hour, and then maybe she'll go back to sleep. And make sure that, she's getting all of her energy out. Sometimes there's screens involved when they're home with them on the weekend, and she's just not tired enough to go to sleep. So again, I'd have to really dive into a little bit more about your daily schedule, but hopefully some of those tips help.
Makes sense. Thank you. Next, we have a question about, and I don't know if there is a specific answer for this, but what age would you introduce a Levy? a stuffed toy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if your little one has the gross motor skills to pick up something and then put it on their face and take it away, and they're 4 months and older, then typically we say that they're okay. You're okay to introduce a Levy. I usually suggest to check with your doctor or your pediatrician first, especially if they're 4 or 5 months. Typically 6 months is older, that's usually kind of the safe zone. But again, if you are uncomfortable, definitely talk with your doctor and just ensure that they do have the gross motor skills to pick up and put it on their face and remove it. And also just make sure the Levy isn't something that shakes or rattles or makes noise or is anything that's going to be very distracting for them to go to sleep. It should really just be their kind of comfort sleep object.
Perfect. Next question. Curious to know if you think a timed noise machine is a sleep prop.
No. So I get that question a lot, where people think that sound machines are sleep props. It is something that helps your little one go to sleep, but it's not actually putting them to sleep like a bottle or rocking or like a pacifier or anything like that. It's just something that is helping them get the sleep that they need. So we want to kind of recreate that womb environment. And in the womb, it's really dark and it's actually very loud in terms of that similar sound or the heartbeat sound. So no, it's not a sleep prop. It's definitely something that you can potentially remove at some point when you don't need it anymore. I did hear the time in there. You don't want it on a timer. So some of them are designed to shut off after 30 or 45 minutes, which is basically a sleep cycle. It's very poorly designed. It's on my list to write all these sleep companies and tell them to remove these timers. You want it to be playing nonstop the entire time your little one is sleeping, no highs and lows, no stops and starts. White noise, pink noise, brown noise, or the rain setting are all acceptable. If you are nervous about it, if you're uncomfortable about it, you can just put it on softly. But I typically suggest that the sound machines be between 60 and 70 decibels. You can download a decibel reader app on your phone. They're free. Put it in the room and test it out. Usually as loud as like when you're in the shower, that loud. And yeah, no, I wouldn't worry about it becoming a sleep prop.
Perfect. Thanks. Our next question is, should we wake up a child from a nap/sleep if they are past wake time?
Definitely. I'm the sleep consultant that says wake a sleeping baby. And that is because, again, whatever you do during the day affects whatever happens at night. So if your little one is sleeping all day or sleeping past a feed, then they're going to make up for that time at night. They're going to want to feed at night or they're going to want to party at night. So usually I suggest don't go past the feed. So usually it's every 2 to 3 hours. If it's time for them to feed, then definitely wake them up. And then also it's a bit of science and math in terms of figuring out their schedule. If they're, having a great, let's say they're on 3 naps and they're having a really, really great second nap, but then you need to wake them up in order to get that third nap in before bedtime. Or even if they're on 1 nap and you need to wake them up by 3 o'clock so that they can go to bed at 7:30 kind of thing. So there's definitely times when you have to wake them.
Perfect. Next question is, do you have a recommended window for starting to sleep train a baby?
12 weeks and 12 pounds. We don't start them any earlier than that just because they're typically not developmentally ready. And we also want them to be a little bit heavier in weight. So 12 weeks, 12 pounds, anytime after that, you can sleep train. It just comes down to personal choice in terms of like when you are ready to do it. We do have like a fresh start program when we work with newborns, but it's not sleep training. It's more just like instilling kind of forming some new habits for sleep so that you might get to avoid sleep training later on. But yeah, 12 weeks, 12 pounds, and the rest is up to you.
Perfect. Our next question is, how do you suggest getting an almost 3-year-old to go to sleep awake on their own? Right now, I have to fall asleep with her. We had tried crying out once or twice when she was little, but never stuck with it. I'm losing hours every night lying with her in a twin bed to get her to sleep. We do the bath and calm music routine with books, but I have to be there or lay down with her to get her to fall asleep.
Well, I'm sorry that you're losing sleep. That is not fun at all. Again, that's her sleep prop. She doesn't know how to independently go to sleep. So you can implement all of the tips that I talked about today in terms of making it dark, white noise, bedtime routine, all of that. But then at the end of the day, she doesn't know how to go to sleep on her own. So you have to come up with that plan. Um, you have to figure that out between you and your partner of exactly what you're going to do when you leave that room and she gets upset and she runs to the door and she's crying and screaming for you to come back in the room. You have to come up with a consistent plan in place and exactly what you're going to do. This is where clients work with me. I do an 1.5-hour consultation on how to do that. And I create a custom sleep plan for them and give them that sleep plan. And then I work with them for 2 weeks. So unfortunately, it's hard for me just to say, do this, because that's not the case. So definitely come up with some sort of plan. Rewards are great, especially with that age. Giving them a little bit of choices. It's definitely a power struggle at that age. So maybe allowing her to pick her pajamas, allowing her to pick her PJs that night. But then again, setting the clear expectations when it's bedtime that she goes to sleep on her own and coming up with a plan on how you're going to do that. And then if you don't know what to do, because there's so much information out there, then either turn to myself or a professional to help you with that.
Perfect, thanks. The next question is, how does a breastfeeding mom ensure that their baby is getting full feeds before bed? Any tips?
That's a bit of like a feeding issue. So it's not my, area of expertise, but feeding is very much related to sleep, and having 3 kids and breastfed them all and just, researching a lot. I do know a little bit about that area. But you got to keep them awake, number one. So if they're falling asleep at all on the breast or the boob or the bottle, then they're probably not going to get a full feed. Tickle them, blow on them, strip them down so they're naked, make sure it's a really bright, light room, stop, burp them. And then also make sure your supply is good as well, which is always hard. Make sure they're having lots of wet diapers throughout the day. Pump, you can do a bit of pumping to see how your supply is. If you are concerned about your supply, do some power pumping, which is basically after you feed in the morning, pump for 5 or 10 minutes after, and then before you go to bed, pump 10, 15 minutes before you go to bed to help increase your supply. But definitely keep them awake, keep them sucking. You can, express, squeeze to help with the flow, and then look at your diapers. But yeah, that's, again, if you're having issues with that, you might want to talk to your doctor or lactation consultant.
Makes sense. Thanks. Our next question is it normal for kids to suddenly change sleep habits when going to bed? My preschooler, who is almost 3, has always slept well, went to sleep easily with no aids, and has slept through the night for quite some time. But ever since we moved him from a crib to a bed, he has been refusing to let us leave the room and gets upset. He will suddenly ask to use the potty, get a Kleenex, etc. Anything he knows will keep us there. Any advice?
Right. Yeah. So it's similar to the other advice I was giving for the 3-year-old and those type of ages. They're in a new bed, so now they can get out of that bed. So now they are testing the limits and seeing what they can get away with, and they are, pushing those boundaries and coming up with a million excuses. So be consistent. Set the consistent routine of exactly what you're going to do at bedtime and nighttime, and don't give in to their, needs and desires. Basically, I want water. No, it's bedtime. I need to go to the bathroom. No, it's bedtime. So yeah, again, you have to have clear boundaries for their little one, and you have to come up with that plan that I've been mentioning many, many times in terms of what you're going to do when they're not going to sleep and coming out of their room and coming into your bed, and how you're going to handle that. And just be consistent. They, at that age, they're very hard because they're so vocal, but they're also very quick to get back on track if you just kind of like lay down the law and be consistent. They're smart and they pick up on it like that. So come up with a plan, or like I've been saying, work with a professional.
Perfect. Thank you. And so we've got 15 minutes left. Thank you to everyone for your questions. We'll do our best to get through as many more as we can. And I'm trying to diversify them as I'm sort of going through so that we're not too repetitive here. So our next one, my daughter is 5 years old. She is a light sleeper. A little knock in the morning wakes her up and she is super active. She doesn't take a nap right now during the day, but she sleeps 9 to 10 hours at night. Is this sufficient sleep?
Sorry, was it 5 years old?
5 years old, yeah.
Yeah, so no naps at 5. They usually don't need it unless, they've had a rough night. 9 to 10 hours seems a little low. 9 does. 10 to 12 is what we strive for. Is she going to sleep independently? Is she sleeping on her own? What's waking her up? Do you have a white noise to kind of help with that? Is she cold? She might just be a child that requires less sleep. I'd like to see at least 10 though. But yeah, answer those questions for me. Is she going to sleep independently? What happens when she wakes in the middle of the night? Are you going to her? Are you then sleeping with her? Are you giving her anything? Maybe try like a fan or a white noise if she is a really light sleeper. That's totally fine. And yeah, I'd have to again dive a little deeper into your schedule of what's going on. Is she eating enough during the day? Maybe she needs a bedtime snack. Yeah, maybe book a call with me.
Perfect. Our next question is there an ideal bedroom setup for a 2.5-year-old and a 4-year-old?
I'm assuming that's a room sharing question. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, my kids actually sleep together as well. So there's not really, in terms of like room sharing or not room sharing, I would suggest to set it up the same way. So make it really dark. If they like white noise, then, put some white noise on. If they require that, put the white noise on. Especially if they're light sleepers or they're going to wake each other up, then I always suggest some sort of sound machine. But in terms of them sleeping together, the same expectations should apply in terms of staying in their bed. That's where they sleep all night. No one comes out of their bed. If one of them comes out, if they're just told to go back to sleep, then the other one doesn't come out. Again, just set clear expectations for both of them, and they will adapt and adjust. They might, be a little silly the first couple nights of sleeping with each other in the same room. But eventually, again, with consistency and clear expectations, then they'll know what to expect and they'll stay in their beds. And again, use some white noise if you're worried about them waking each other up and make the room dark, etc. But bunk beds, separate beds, that's totally fine. If they're both good sleepers, then you shouldn't have issues. I would not suggest room sharing if one of them or both of them are not the greatest sleepers, because then you're going to be up and dealing with that. So get them both sleeping well and then have them room share.
Makes sense. Thank you. And then is there a good or bad time to transition from a crib to a bed?
Bad time would be if your little one is not sleeping well. So very similar to the room sharing. If your little one is not sleeping well and they are in the same room with you, it's much easier to get up and deal with them when they're in the same room with you. I would not suggest moving them into their crib if they're awake multiple times at night, because then you will just have to get up and then walk to the room and deal with them. And that's just going to be exhausting for you. So I typically suggest to have them sleeping really well before you make the move. APA suggests that they be in your room until up to 6 months. But it really is personal choice in terms of when you want to make the move. if they're sleeping well. I have clients who are, 4 or 5 months that work with me, and they want them sleeping in their own room. So they make the move then, if you're confident that it's safe for your little one. But APA does suggest 6 months.
Perfect. Thank you. Next question is, I have a 3-year-old and we follow a bedtime map each night and he follows it really well. But once it's light out between 7 and 7:30 p.m., it takes him anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes to fall asleep. Is this normal? Is there something I could be doing to help him settle quicker?
Is your little one still napping? If he's 3 and still napping, then he might just need a later bedtime. Or if it's just the light that's bothering him, then make that room darker, dark as possible. On our website, on the WeeSleep website, we have a link to all of our kind of sleep products that we'd recommend. The pull down blackout blinds, the suction cup blackout blinds, the blackout curtains, or you can do like really quick, really cheap, and just put like garbage bags on the windows to make it darker, for like a quick temporary solution, and then look into more of a long-term solution. But time change will help. It's going to get dark very early soon, so time change will help with that. But if not, then make the room darker. And if it is dark and he's still having problems going to sleep, then is he going to sleep independently, or is he napping and he might need a later bedtime? Or what are his activity before he's going to sleep? Does he come home from preschool and sit in front of the TV for 2 or 3 hours? Then he might not be tired enough. So yeah, I'd have to look a little deeper into what's going on, but those are some tips that might help.
Perfect. Thank you. Next question is, what are some good props for nap time for babies?
Good props for nap time? I'm not 100% sure what they mean by that question. Maybe sleep products that they mean. Any age? Was there any age listed, or
That's
no?
for babies.
For babies. Okay, so if they're not rolling and 3 or 4 months and younger, then swaddles are great. Again, kind of recreating that womb environment, getting them really, really cozy and tight. That can help. And then same things that I was talking before about, making that room dark, turning on that white noise. Looking for their sleepy cues to make sure, knowing what time and when they should be going to sleep. If they're out of the swaddle, sleep sacks are really great. I always recommend sleep sacks. Again, on our website, all of the Amazon products that we recommend are on there. I'm trying to think of, I would keep it as simple as possible. Those are kind of your main ones. Video monitors. I love video monitors. Just because you can see them, and that really helps with that kind of 10 minutes that I was talking about, and you can figure out whether you need to intervene or not, and you can just peace of mind make sure that they're okay. If they're in the room with you, the bassinets like the dock tots are really great. There's a little bit of controversy on the dock tots, so watch out for those ones. But yeah, some sort of like cozy bassinet, and then when they grow out of that, then it's time to move to a crib. And I would not suggest getting those like mini cribs unless you absolutely have to because of your room space. But they grow out of them really fast, so I would suggest just going to like a regular size crib. But yeah, sleep sacks, swaddles, when they're really, really little, like newborns, if you need to use the soothers and pacifiers and it helps, then sure, that's great. And making sure that their tummies are full as well.
Perfect. Thanks. How do you identify if your child is sleepwalking? What age do you see this in kids?
Oh, sleepwalking. Yeah, it typically doesn't happen until they're much older. There are some that have like night terrors, and the earliest I think I've seen is like 3, but most of them are 4 and above when they have night terrors or night walking or sleepwalking. Make sure that the environment in your house is set up safely in terms of like the high locks on the doors, if they're upstairs, baby gates on the stairs. And if you do, some people even have to like kind of lock the door so they can't leave the childproof locks so they can't leave the room in the middle of the night if you're worried about safety. Don't wake them up, walk them back into bed, tuck them in, and hopefully they'll go back to sleep.
Perfect, makes sense. So this is another question with a similar situation with a toddler who's 2.5 years old coming into his or her parents' bed nightly around 2:30 a.m. As far as implementing a plan to get her to return to bed, is staying in the room with her to settle, creating a new prop for her. We are trying to bring her back to bed and say goodnight, but then she gets upset or yells for the other parent and wakes up the household. So alternatively, do we just keep bringing her back to bed and leaving her and let her have a loud meltdown?
It really depends on which plan you are choosing. So when you work with WeeSleep, we have 2 plans that we choose. We don't believe in cry it out. So just putting your little one and closing the door and never responding to them. You need to respond to them, but it depends on how you're going to respond to them. So you can stay in the room or you can leave. But again, you have to figure out what you're going to do when that's happening. If you're staying in the room and they're falling asleep and you do that every single night, then yes, that's going to turn into a sleep prop. But if you gradually wean them off of being in the room, then eventually with the right plan, they'll be able to go to sleep in the room without you. But if you're doing it every single night for 2, 3, 4 months, then yeah, it's going to be a new sleep prop. So again, personal choice in terms of which method you want to choose, but you need to have a plan in place for whichever one you're doing.
Makes sense. Any tips on transitioning from a swaddle to a sleep sack? The little one just turned 4 months.
Make sure that the moral reflux is gone if you are taking away the swaddle, or if they're rolling, then you have to take away the swaddle. You can do it completely cold turkey and just deal with a couple rough nights of them relearning how to sleep on their own. Or you can do it slowly with, one arm out for a couple nights, and even maybe just a couple naps, and then both arms out with still being swaddled for a couple naps and a couple nights, and then eventually the sleep sack.
Perfect. Makes sense. And we might have already covered this, but at what age should children be dropping naps completely?
Generally we like to see till at least 3 to 4, but every baby is different. So some little ones are like 2.5 and they're starting to slowly drop their naps, but we usually like to see until the age of 3 and older.
Perfect. Okay, we've got 2 more quick questions we'll squeeze in here. What are your feelings about the wake up light clocks where they change colors to say it's okay to wake up?
Yeah, ready to wake clocks like the Grow clock or the Hatch. Yeah, awesome. If your little one is in a toddler bed or a bed, it can definitely be helpful with not having them leave the room too early in the morning. They're basically creatures of the sun. So if they see a little bit of light, then they want to get up and they want to wake up. Whereas us, we can tell the time. So we know that, oh, it's 5:30 in the morning. That's way too early. I'm going back to sleep. But for toddlers and little ones, they can't tell the time. So yes, I'm a big fan of the ready to wake clocks.
Perfect. Our last question is, what age do you recommend transitioning from a crib to a bed, and any tips on this process?
We have a little saying in the crib, you must be until you're 3. So yes, until 3 or later if possible, just because sometimes they're just developmentally not ready to go to a toddler bed until at least 3. Their comprehension, they might just not understand that they have to stay in their bed all night. But that being said, I have worked with many 2-year-olds and 2.5-year-olds that we have to make the transition because of safety reasons, because they're climbing out of the bed, out of the crib, or some of them actually develop a fear of the crib as well. So yes, again, with a proper plan in place, you can make the move before 3, but we usually like to see them in the crib until at least 3 or later.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura, for all of this amazing information. And thank you so much to all of our parents for joining us today. As we mentioned, we will send a follow-up email to you all with more information about how you can, excuse me, reach Laura directly and get more of your sleep questions answered, and also where you can access a recording of this session, just in case you'd like to go back and rewatch for anything that you might have missed. Thank
Awesome.
you again, Laura.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was so much fun. I hope my sleep tips help. Please book a call with me if I couldn't answer your question. And also, as an extra little bonus, it'll be in the email, but I always offer 15% off to all of the participants for today. So that'll be in the email.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Awesome. Bye. Take care,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.